Welcome back to the channel. I'm Robin Clever. Every now and then I get asked to do something which is kind of like a prototype. And this is a classic example of doing something and basically making it up as I go along. So my good client has come to me and said he wants to have a floating shelf made of concrete, cast in situ, just like work surfaces. But the difference here is that we're going to cast it in situ between two walls. It's just over 3 meters long and it's going to effectively be self-supporting. So it's going to butt against the walls at the back and the sides, and that will give it its strength. But because it's quite slight at the front, it's 90 millimeters, which is just about 3 3/4 inches for our imperial friends. What we need to do is make sure that we can get enough support by rebar inside the structure before we cast it, that it's going to go off and it's going to be really nice and true. It's a little bit like making a plank lintel. And you know, anyone who's used plank lintels, the small thin ones, it's all about, when you're using them, about the mass of masonry above that plank lintel that makes it work. So you can't really put a point load on it. So what we're going to do is we're going to have the front at around about 90 millimeters. We're coming out 500 millimeters. And at the back end, at the wall end, I'm going to thicken that up to about 130. So it's tapering from thin to thick, but it's going to have a dead level top, obviously. Now, the reason for that is then I can get my rebar coming through in the middle of that 130, so 65 mil, back out towards the front. It will enable there to be a lot more mass of concrete where it's solid and effectively holding that nice thin piece through the front and also creating a little bit of strength. So we're going to get on. The first job is set out the center of where the concrete's going to go, put some holes in for the rebar. We're then going to chem fix that rebar in. I've got that warming up here because this stuff has been in my store and it's pretty cold. And we're going to chem fix those in, wire it up, get some shuttering underneath, get it all nice and true, mix our concrete, and then we're going to get it in. So keep tuned and let's see how we get on. So here is our height that we want to finish the shelf, and what we're going to do is we're going to have it 130 at the back here. So that'll be the overall. So the first job is to get a line of rebar holes at 65. So we want to level that through, space those equally. I'd imagine if we go in at about 200 apart, that will be adequate. That's equivalent of having an 8-inch grid, if you like. So we'll do that. We're going to laser this through here, drill our holes, chem fix them in, and we'll get that done now. So I've got my center and I want to run my holes at 200 mil centers. So I've got a little rod here and we're just going to mark those along the laser line quickly and get those positioned. It's the easiest and quickest way of doing it without scrambling around for a tape measure, especially when you're working on your own. Now my cables from these sockets above me are not running down, fortunately, so we haven't got to worry too much about blowing the place up. Right, so let's drill. What we're going to do first is start with a small pilot bit, and we're going to drill all the holes out to a set depth. We only want to go in around about 75 millimeters. This is a brick wall. We're going to go in 75, we'll increase the size of the hole, we'll vacuum them all out, get the dust out, and then we'll chem fix some rods in. Just do a couple on camera and then I'm halfway through my formwork on my shuttering. I'm just putting the grounds in. So what I've got is a large timber secured back against the wall. And this is obviously going to support the floor of the shutter. Everything with shuttering, you've got to imagine you've got to take it apart afterwards. So you don't really want any screws inside the shutter that you can't get to. So everything's got to be dismantled from effectively the outside. So I'm going to actually form this tray that goes through, will effectively sit in there, and I'll put a couple of screws pinched up underneath on the bottom. I'm going to put a full bearer through the front, so I've cut these small legs in. I've actually lasered them to get them exactly where I want them. I'll put my main timber through the front, which is the datum. It's going to keep everything true, square, flat, straight and level. We'll put a few legs in to take up the weight. There's not masses of weight in here, but there's enough. And then we'll put the front shutter on. And it's at that point where we will bond our rebar back into the wall with some Chemfix. So we'll set these through. Now I've taken them on the angle to suit the angle of the formwork. So we've got a slanting bottom, so there's a bigger mass near the wall and it's lighter at the front, which will help the front not be sort of out of weight, if you like. It's going to be supported by the mass at the back. So we'll get the tray in, we'll get the front on, then we'll put these through and make sure they're all exactly in line. And in the middle of our concrete, we'll wire a couple across, and that'll create a really, really nice, strong bit of metalwork which will help us. I've got my base in, or the base of the shutter in. This is what's going to hold the concrete. I've put a really nice, long, strong bearer through the front. I've got one fixed to the wall. I've got some legs in as well, so actually all of the weight can push through those legs and not rely on the fixings. Now I'm going to go and put my rebars in before we cast the concrete, obviously. Now I drilled all of the holes in line, or roughly in line with the base of this, so when the rebar was in, it was in the middle of the concrete. What I didn't want to do, if I was level, I didn't want it to be tight or touching the bottom. You really want the rebar smack bang in the middle. And so what I can do now, when I Chemfix these in, I'm going to use a chemical resin just to put these in. I've got a small timber that is roughly the center of the concrete at the front, where it's 90 mil, that's half of that is 46, 45. So all I've got to do is, when I'm setting these bars in, I've just got to make sure that they're round about in line with the edge of that, and then I know they're all nice and you know, in where I want them. So that's going to be an easy way of me doing it now. It's just a matter of filling my hole up with the chemical resin, working my bar in, and just pushing it to where I need it to be. And I'll just keep repeating that process here. And the other thing I can do is also is line those up with the edge of the timber, so they're far enough back from the front of the concrete, if you like, because they don't want to be right near the edge of the concrete. They need to be back a little bit as well. And what these are going to do is these are going to provide the strength for this whole piece of concrete. So let's get on, chem fix these in, wire a cage through, probably hang it underneath, and that'll be fantastic. So this is chemical resin, so I just want to get this coming through. What it's doing, it's got two chambers, it's got two parts to it. They mix in this nozzle. You can see it's like a spiral, like a helter-skelter in there, and as you mix the two compounds, then they pass through, and you want to make sure it looks all pretty consistent. If I just put a bit out on a board, okay, so it starts coming through. You want it to look a little bit, we want to squeeze a bit through first, but that's pretty much what it should look like, sort of like a metallic look. You can see that it's a cream and it's got a much darker compound. And then you just want to get a load into the hole. I always try to poke, you know, see what I'm filling it up like this. Let's do a few at a time. There we go. It's lovely gear. And the idea of it is that it's going to just lock off these and fill up those gaps around these bars. So, pop that in there. So we want to just turn this into the hole, give it a little push. Now you can see that it's all oozing out, that's great. Now I want to be just above there, which is perfect. Do the same with this one. There we go. There we go. We'll let those go off. Rebar's nice because it's got a nice sort of spiral to it. It's got some shape, and it actually works that resin really nicely. So we'll just get that around to where we want it. And then we can get them all roughly in line and keep repeating the process. Good job before lunch because everything can go off at lunchtime. Lovely job. Let's do 3 at a time. Oh, that's great. And then we will, once we've got these in, we'll just clean off some of that excess that's oozing out. That doesn't really matter, it's in the concrete, it would be fine. That's a nice job. There we go. You've got a nice bit of play with the rebar. We're just going to set it all a nice way in. There we go. But this is important though, you know, we really do need the strength for this. And I think this is the only way we're going to borrow the strength of the wall through these rebars, and it's going to be perfect. That's it. Tiny bit more down. Perfect. Okay. Now before they go off, I'll just take some of this excess away from there. Okay, lovely job. You can already see it's starting to want to go off. Let's pop a bit of that in there. No, I don't like to waste nothing. A bit more there. So you could actually put these in without a chem fix, because once they're all gone off, the chem fix is more really to sort of set them where I want them, really, I would say. And it's certainly going to do that. Okay. Let's get done. I do like a bit of chem fix. And the last one here for now. Perfect. Right, let's clean some of that excess off. I've got all my rebar in now. It's all chem fixed in. I've wired a transom through the front there to connect everything together. Sorry about the sunlight. I can't avoid that. I can't help that. So this is all ready to go. It's really strong. And the idea of it is that the concrete is going to be supported by these rebar, obviously, and it's going to give it this lovely bit of strength through the front. It's going to be like, look at my shadow there, it's going to be like a great big lintel. So we're ready now to put the front face of the shutter on, get that exactly as we want it, and then we're going to mix up some concrete and we're going to pour it. So I'm getting the front face fixed through now. I'm going straight into the base so it's nice and tight. This is the line of the screw into the base material, and then I'm going to connect it into the stiffer grounds underneath, which is doing all the work, which is holding everything. So we'll whack a few screws through here. Nice. There's not going to be a lot of force in this concrete because it's quite concentrated, the weight towards the back. Put some through the front here. Nice bit of shuttering. That's it. I'm going to pleat this front here. Let's keep those nice and tidy. Oh, lovely job. And the coffee's just arrived. Perfect. Absolutely perfect. Marvellous. We're now mixing the concrete and we're getting it all in. This is the first job. Obviously there is the reinforcement that you can see which is going to give it all the strength it needs when it goes off. I thought this would be useful to give you an idea of just how that works. That's it, we'll get it all in, flatten it all off, and then we'll start giving it some finish. So I've had a pretty good day, shuttering all done, reinforcement all done. Now Chris, my good friend and client, has been out there mixing concrete, bringing it in, and that really has helped. So the idea is we've got the concrete all in now, we've given it a little tamp. A tamp is basically where you start creating all of the bubble, getting the air out of it, and making sure that there's no big voids in it. Also, you can do that by tapping your shutter. So I've got along and done a little bit of that as well. So just before I leave, I'm gonna go back over with a tamp from the back to the front and literally just give it a little bit more, flatten it off. Now this is gonna take some time to go off because it's quite a mass, it's quite thick. And what Chris is going to do later on, he's going to keep his eye on it, and probably in about 4 or 5 hours time, when it starts to look a bit more matte, it's got all the water on it at the moment, he can then start using a flat trowel and just taking out any high spots and giving it a little bit of a polish up. And then I reckon by the morning it will also be good to just give a good rub up then as well. I mean, with concrete or with concrete tops, for example, it depends whether you want a mirror finish, whether you want a cast finish, and quite often I've seen people actually want a tamped finish, which is basically they would leave it at this point. I personally think you should take the ridges out of it so it's a little bit more flat. Sorry if I've got a bit of a builder's bum going on, can't avoid that. Losing weight. Here we go. There we go. So we'll give that a minute or two. So that's the principle of casting something in concrete. We'll probably come back and get some pictures of it when we pull out the shuttering. So the idea is we unscrew this front face and that just carefully comes off. Everything else, for example, this ledger that goes all the way through there, it's sitting into 2 housed legs on the end, but we can take 2 screws out and that should come away from the base. The base will just ease itself down then and everything will just come away. So there's no mechanical fixings anywhere that are gonna stop it from coming out. So that's it, we're just gonna tidy up, get the tools away and go home.